It's Achahirlig, and I too would like to welcome the Tuam Mother and Babies Alliance to the gallery here today, and to commend you for your hard work and perseverance in relation to the campaigning that you have been doing. I'd like, Minister, to note that I think a quarter of the amendments have been ruled out of order, which is an incredible, and many of them reasonable amendments. And I would ask the Minister, will you be accepting any amendments tonight? Will you be accepting any amendments tonight? Okay. This legislation is long overdue, but it is incredibly flawed. Specifically, how it proportions redress based on the length of time that a person has spent in an institution. That is so obvious to anybody who reads this legislation. Minister, who are you to determine that someone who spent 179 days in an institution is any less deserving of compensation than someone who spent 181 days in an institution? It's absolutely absurd. From speaking to survivors, it's clear to me that much of the abuse actually occurred when they were farmed out or boarded out from their homes. In many cases, people who were born in mother and baby homes were sent to local families where they were often ill-treated, required to work hard on the farm without pay, with no prospect of inheritance, in atrocious conditions, sleeping in sheds sometimes with animals and eating their dinners separately from the biological children in the family. And this is not to mention the stories of physical, emotional and sexual abuse of the worst kind that was experienced by so many. And it's not to mention as well the societal attitudes at the time that so many of these survivors had to deal with. They were deemed by many people to be second-class citizens, an attitude that was certainly the case in Tuam, and actually was reinforced in many ways in the state's education system. Catherine Corliss often talks about how the word "the home babies" was used to separate other children in the national school, and how children who misbehaved in school were often threatened with the statement, "If you don't stop, I'll put you sitting with the home babies." And this bill makes no provision for persons who might have left an institution early but were placed by the state in settings where they were still abused, where they were still suffered, and they were still othered. I want to thank my parliamentary assistant, Luke Silk, who hails from Tuam and has put a lot of work into drafting these amendments which seek to right the wrongs and the injustices that are clear in this legislation. And I would sincerely hope that the government and that the minister will actually listen to the debate on this floor and say what he means when he answered my question, that he will listen to what we have to say and take that into consideration. In relation to some of the amendments that we're looking at, there's an amendment on the Glenamady home, which is omitted from this bill. This institution is obviously long closed, but it is possible that there are some survivors alive. And even if there isn't, I think it's important that we recognise the lives that were spent or lost there. And I'm thinking of Mary Crowe, who died 100 years ago today in Glenamady at the age of 1 year old. She died from TB. And she was more than one of 50 children who died between 1922 and 1925 in Glenamady, for whom Mr. Silk has obtained a death certificate. Some more of the amendments that we're looking to bring in are in relation to the time restrictions. Basically, we want to see a situation where applicants to the scheme are granted a decision within a period of 3 months, in a speedy fashion, because many of these people are of a certain age that they need to have these decisions made fast. And within 1 year of the application, that they're given access to all their files and documents. That needs to happen. We can't withhold and still seek to withhold information from people. The purpose of these amendments is to ensure timely redress to people who need them. And I have amendments here too, which will look to ensure that the scheme, when it is up and running, will actually seek to make contact, to initiate contact with the survivors, rather than just relying on survivors to initiate contact with the scheme itself. If the state is truly sorry for the way it's treated survivors, it will be actively reaching out to them and asking people for help in the process of redress, rather than just sitting back and waiting for people to contact them as well. I also want to mention a very special lady here today as well, Sheila O'Byrne, a woman who gave birth in an institution and who cycles regularly to the gates of the Dáil in rain, hail and snow with little handwritten placards. And she stands outside to hold this house to account, to ensure that there's justice for her and for others like her. She's a fierce and formidable woman with a very big heart, and I'd urge other deputies to stop and chat her if they get an opportunity, because there's a lot they can learn from her. Throughout the history of the state, the survivors of the mother and baby homes were made to feel that their lives, due to the circumstances in which they were conceived, were of less values to the lives of others. This is absolutely wrong, and it needs to be refuted wholeheartedly as many times as we can. All human life is equal. You have as much right to this country as anybody else. You have as much right to life as anyone else. You have as much right to the Dáil and to justice as anyone else. And anybody who has implied otherwise at any stage of your life is absolutely wrong. And the state must never stop apologising for how they've treated you. And in reality, they need to go beyond apology. They need to provide recompense for the wrongs that have been inflicted on these individuals. And it must be done fairly and with a little bit of humanity as well. And that, Minister, is sorely missing from many aspects of this bill. It's a shocking situation, and it is deeply frustrating for the likes of myself, where we have tabled 9 amendments and 7 of them have been ruled out of order. 7 logical, reasonable, common sense solutions to help people have been ruled out of order, and I believe that's an injustice too. Gur maith agat a cathaoirligh.